After the tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk, there's been a lot of discussion about gun control again, both in the media and from politicians. I specifically saw something from AOC on how this is a good time to talk about gun control. So I thought that we would give our perspective on that as people who go out and shoot guns. And we want to be respectful about talking about this. So please, if you're going to comment, be respectful. However, we have a very similar gun that was allegedly used in the shooting of Charlie Kirk, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And so we're going to talk about why that gun may not be the right gun to talk about gun control. We're going to give you some examples of why that's the case and demonstrate that. And then we're going to talk about some, what is referred to as common sense gun reforms and why those may or may not make sense. So Carl is here with a Mauser, which was allegedly used in the shooting. So before Carl talks about this gun, this is not the exact same gun. It's very similar to the gun that was used in the shooting, but it's from the same era, and it is very similar. It has the same action, which we'll talk about in a second as well. But why don't you talk about this gun?
So what happens typically in a modern firearm, a bolt action firearm, is when you push the bolt forward, it pushes the bullet out of the of your magazine and pushes it into the chamber. This does the same thing, but instead of pushing it out of the magazine and now it's just loose, so if you push it just a little bit, you'll see it just wobbling around. This actually grabs it out of the magazine, holds it in place, and feeds it directly into the center of the chamber, as opposed to having a feed ramp or anything like that. You don't necessarily need one. That's what makes this massively reliable. It also makes it really hard to manufacture, so it also made it a lot more expensive.
So the Mauser is a very historic and well-known and established firearm, but the question is, does it actually, does an assassination using a Mauser necessitate gun reform? So we're going to run a couple tests and kind of show you guys what the difference is. And the first thing we're going to do is show you this. All right, so in a typical, what a lot of people talk about as like mass shootings and stuff, they use a 223 or 5.56 round. This is a 5.56 round right here. I'm trying to get the camera to focus on it. It'll probably focus on it in a second when I show you this. This is the size of the bullet that was used for the Charlie Kirk assassination, which is a 30-06. So you can see that there's a massive difference between those two. When they talk about high-powered rifles, this is actually what they're usually talking about, which is actually, you're not even allowed to use this for deer hunting because it's not big enough to take down a deer. And actually, when we do talk about deer hunting, we are talking about things like the 30-06, which is this one right here. And so this is essentially a deer hunting cartridge. And so when we talk about, gun control and things like that, and we're talking about high-powered rifles, this is an actual high-powered rifle, but it is being shot through a bolt-action gun that is being used for deer hunting. So when they talk about taking away guns that are like this, they're not supposedly talking about guns that use this. So this right here is a Remington Model 700. It has been a historically very, very common gun, both for deer hunting and for military purposes. So, for example, when the attempted assassination of Donald Trump happened, the Secret Service used a different chambering and everything, but they used this to take out the assassin at what, I forget where that was, but they used this to take out that assassin. So it is used by military and the Secret Service and other groups. However, it is also, this is my deer hunting gun, right? It is a bolt-action rifle, and it is chambered in 30-06 the same way that the Mauser was. However, when we talk about assault rifles and things like that, again, people are usually talking about AR-15s. I don't own an AR-15, and so we don't have one here to show you. But what I want to point out is that it's usually about the way the gun looks more than what it actually does. So Carl has another gun that was formerly used in a version of a gun that was formerly used in military situations, and it functions and is more powerful, functions similarly, and is more powerful than an AR-15. It doesn't function literally the same way in terms of the action, but it is a semi-automatic gun that is in 308. So why don't you talk about this?
So this is an M1A Scout. So for those of you familiar with World War II history, the M1A, or M1 Garand, was one of the world's first battle rifles. This was the military's upgrade of that.
But the point is that this, under most categories that have come out in terms of like what is an assault rifle, this is not actually included on that list. However, it is more powerful and probably more accurate than an AR-15. So we're going to do a time trial, and we're going to see how many rounds I can get out of my 30-06. We're not going to use the Mauser because there's some issues with it right now, but we're going to see how many I can get out of my 30-06 in the amount of time that Carl can empty his whole magazine accurately. We're just going to do this at 50 yards to try to get as many on target as quickly as we can, even though this is way beyond a 50-yard gun. So I can only hold, and this is another thing, talking about high-capacity magazines, this gun, at least, can only hold 3 in the magazine, which you have to load from the top, and then you can ghost load a 4th round in here. So this is basically potentially up to 4 rounds, and how many rounds does your hold?
So when you're talking about firearms and what the magazine and what the capacity is, it's usually number of rounds plus 1. That plus 1 is referring to 1 in the chamber. So Scott's is a 3+1. This is a whatever can fit in an external magazine plus 1. The standard that this came with was a 20-round magazine.
And what size do you have right now?
The size that I have, because of restrictions, is 10 round.
Yeah. So we're going to see how many rounds he can get off while I do as many rounds as I can get off. And we're going to try to do them as accurately as possible downrange. So they're not going to be super accurate because we're racing, but we're going to try to see if we can get all of them on the target at 50 yards.
All right, so before we continue real quick, I do want to explain the difference between a 10-round and a 20-round magazine. Now, in this particular state, 10-round magazines are the only ones that are technically legal, unless you've filled out specific forms. This is a 10-round magazine for this M1A. This is the size of a 20-round magazine for the M1A, but this one has been permanently disabled from being able to hold more than 10 rounds. That's why this one is legal in our state. Now, the reason I have this one specifically is because this one is kind of a pain in the butt to put with this particular firearm. So let me explain. When this goes in, note I also want to point out this is empty and the gun is clear. When this goes in, I'm not going to cycle it forward. You have a very small amount of space to be able to actually pull this out, and this does have to rock out. So you have to push this, and then you have this space right here to kind of pull that magazine out. I don't like it. These edges can be a little sharp. It's a little frustrating. You can't get a good grip on it. This is the size of the magazine that this gun originally came with back in the 50s when it was developed, or 40s when it was developed. Excuse me. And this is what the magazine looks like full length. So now you have a good grip here. You can push and easily maneuver it out. So that's why I have this overall.
I want you to have it loaded, ready to go. All right?
I'm ready.
So, demonstrating the difference between a semi-automatic and a bolt-action rifle. Your marks. Get set. Go. Are you done?
I'm out.
Tried to get another one in there. All right.
Guns are open, clear, magazine detached. Yours is unloaded.
Mine is unloaded. I put another one in. I was surprised I was able to load a 4th or 5th. All right. For the record, once my sight was barely on the target, I fired.
Yeah, I wasn't. Actually, that's a fair point. The difference between a semi-auto and a bolt action in terms of accuracy isn't necessarily just the bolts, although it does make it more accurate inherently.
Right.
It's also the fact that it slows you down to shoot.
Right.
And if you take your time to shoot, you will be more accurate. And truth be told, as you could tell in the video, I did speed up.
Yeah.
Well, because I was doing the same thing you did.
Oh, I did not. And so one of the big differences is with that, you can generally stay on target
Yes.
the whole time. With obviously, there's people who are better at bolt actions than I am, but I'm generally trying to reacquire my target while I'm doing this, and that moves the gun.
Yes.
And so while I'm also trying to look where the target is through the scope, I'm also trying to cycle another round in, and therefore that's moving the gun around too. So all I did was once the crosshairs were somewhere in that yellow, not even the black,
Yeah.
I just hit it. So let's see how we did with me trying to fire as fast as a semi-automatic. All right, clear, clear.
Range is safe.
Range
Going
safe.
down. As we can tell from this, I definitely need to sight my gun in.
Yeah.
But look at that.
Yeah. So you were able to hit this like general grouping pretty well because of the fact that every time you pulled the trigger, you could just get back on target and squeeze the trigger again.
Yep.
Right? And with a semi-automatic, you can actually sort of come down. So the gun's going to raise up a little, and as you're coming down, you squeeze the trigger as you get back to the bullseye, right? So boom, 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 like that. Whereas with me, I got my 4 shots on the target, and I can shoot a lot better than that. I was literally
He says that.
just,
but
once I saw something in this range in the bullseye, I was just squeezing the trigger to try to get it off as fast as possible. If I wanted to hit that bullseye from 50 yards every time, I easily could, but I'm just literally trying to demonstrate that it's really, really hard to use a bolt action rifle as a quote unquote assault rifle, right?
right.
So another thing that is talked about a lot are automatic rifles being used, right? And how in America we don't want people walking around with automatic rifles. Fortunately, automatic rifles, I don't even know how to acquire one. I think there's like some crazy permit and you can get one.
There is a federal certification for it.
Yeah.
Which allows you to own one and use one.
Okay. But they're not. It's not common. Most like when we talk about gun reform and stuff, and people are talking about AR-15s as automatic rifles, right? The AR-15s that they're referring to are not automatic rifles. So what we have are semi-automatic rifles, like this one. You want to talk about that for a sec?
So, and that's a very clear thing. When somebody says automatic, a lot of people automatically assume it can just continuously fire. Automatic can also mean semi-auto, as Scott was mentioning. This is semi-automatic. What that means is when I pull the trigger, the gun fires once. The gas from the bullet cycles the bolt and loads a new round. So instead of manually pushing it forward, pulling it back, all that fun stuff, the gas from the bullet is used to push it back and cycle.
Right. So things like the Mauser, things like this Remington 700,
any bolt action,
you have to close the bolt, fire the gun, open the bolt, close the bolt, fire the gun. And so this is not like when we talk about assault, right? Assault rifles, it depends on what you mean by assault, right? If you are leading an assault in a military situation, you may have someone use this in a sniper situation while someone is using something more like this. And obviously you could have machine guns in a military assault situation, which are fully automatic. But when we talk about the word assault in terms of gun control and things like that, usually what they're talking about are not automatic rifles. They are semi-automatic rifles like this one. The other very important piece of information is that most shootings in the United States happen with handguns.
Yes.
And so when we talk about controlling or regulating rifles, like almost all of the shootings in the United States are done with handguns. Handguns are typically also semi-automatic. They're not fully automatic. And most of the time when there's handgun shootings and stuff, there's a lot of like gang shootings and things like that. And these people who have the guns are not supposed to have the guns in the first place because they already have records. So one of the things that we need to do when we're talking about gun violence is making sure that when people who are not supposed to have guns because they have criminal records do not have those guns, and that ensures that we have a more safe society. And so greater punishments for people caught with guns who aren't supposed to have them is going to help minimize the number of gun deaths, since most gun deaths are from handguns, and handguns are also semi-automatic, meaning you pull the trigger once, they fire once. For the most part, in America, that's how it works. There are exceptions to that, but basically, this is where most shooting, or this is what most shootings involve. Just so everyone is aware, right? Like in the state that we live in and have guns, we have to already have an FBI background check in order to get a pistol permit, which allows us to have pistols and long guns and all this stuff. And it is for concealed carry, but I don't conceal carry. I just use that to be able to go buy ammunition, because you need a license to buy ammunition. I use it to buy long guns because you need a license to buy long guns, and then you can also buy handguns with it, although I don't have a lot of handguns. So in order for me to go hunting in the woods prior to these regulations coming in, all I needed to do was get a hunting permit, and I could go out in the woods and shoot a gun on public land with the permission of the state, right? At a deer, right? When these regulations came in, I still had permission to go out and shoot on public land at a deer, and I was trusted by the state to do that because I had taken the safety course and done all this other stuff. But I could not buy any ammunition to go shoot that gun because of the way that the gun laws worked in the state. So, at least where we live, you already need an FBI background check. You have to pay a tax, essentially, a fee, in order to practice your Second Amendment rights outside of your house. And you have to reapply for that license every 5 years. So there is, and there are still people who commit crimes illegally in the state, who illegally own guns, who are going out and committing murders. So regulating, I have no problem with managing, like making sure that people who shouldn't have guns don't have guns. But the way that our system is set up right now is a little bit backwards in terms of my perspective as a hunter.
Does the FBI actually do the background check?
It's an FBI background check, yes.
It's a federal background check. Does the FBI? That's what I'm at. I don't know. Does the
So
FBI
I'm
actually
pretty sure that the FBI does a background check because I've had multiple FBI background checks, federal background checks, all these other background checks, but I'm pretty sure that it is the FBI that is the one that does it.
That does it?
Also, when you purchase a gun, at least in our state, and this is federal, you have to fill out a form, right? And then for specifically where we live, the seller has to call the government, make sure that you are cleared to receive that gun from purchase, and then once you are cleared by the government, the state government, that you're allowed to purchase a gun, then that transfer can take place. So there's multiple steps beyond just having the gun permit, having the form filled out, and having the government basically clear you to say that you're okay, and paying money to the government in order to practice your Second Amendment rights, which is supposed to be inalienable. So I'm not saying that I'm not against background checks. That's not what I'm saying. I'm arguing that there are multiple steps currently in place, at least where we live, and I'm saying that the burden is actually falling upon the constitutionally, legally acceptable person who's buying that gun by paying money to the government in order to have the right to do that, which is the part that I'm more against.
Right. Well, you put me kind of in a tough spot
Score.
because I agree with your overall sentiment.
Yeah.
I disagree with parts of your conclusion, which was specifically that having money, paying the government money for a license in order to carry and purchase a firearm
Yeah.
is against the Second Amendment. So there is no law in this state, and no law in any state, as far as I know, because it's federally illegal,
Yeah.
against ownership of a firearm.
Unless you're a felon.
Unless you're a felon.
Right.
Fair. Well, unless you're a felon. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to own, or actually, you're not allowed to hold any firearm in the dwelling of anybody of a known felon. So if you live with a known felon and you own guns, you can't keep them in that residence.
Right.
Anyway.
So you're right that technically speaking, I'm allowed to own those guns. I just can't bring them anywhere, and I can't buy ammunition for them
So that
without the
Right.
state permit.
So our state went a little bit more ridiculous with the purchase of ammunition. I agree.
Right.
But I am going to correct you again.
Okay.
You are allowed to bring them everywhere. You're
Yeah.
allowed to bring them to any state. You're allowed to transfer a firearm in your possession.
Yeah.
It might have to be disassembled and potentially locked in various situations depending on the state and regulations. However, you are allowed to transport your firearm to and from the range,
Mhm.
to and from sanctioned events by the NRA, or actually really just officially published events without restriction.
Right.
So the only difference, again, is you can't carry it loaded on your person.
Right.
So I can't have it in a holster.
Right.
But that doesn't restrict me from bringing it to and from legal areas where I can fire this or discharge this firearm.
Yeah. So anyway, I think the pendulum has swung, at least where we are, a little bit too far over, and so I just want people to be aware that there are gun regulations, and they are not just in our state. There are federal gun regulations, and beyond that, many states have state regulations as well. All right, so this is where Carl and I may disagree. This is our in conclusion. So, in my personal opinion, the gun that was used in the assassination of Charlie Kirk is not a gun that would be easily regulated and should not be regulated any more than it already is. So there are certain situations where it's easy to get guns that people shouldn't have, like in terms of felonies and stuff like that, and obviously that should be regulated, as in they shouldn't have them. But this is like literally when they talk about, oh, we don't want to come after your guns, we're just going after the dangerous ones, so on and so forth. The last gun on the list that they always say we're not coming after are your hunting guns. This is a hunting gun.
That is
right?
a hunting rifle.
So it does not make sense to talk about gun regulations in terms of this specific event, because the gun that was used is literally the gun that a lot of Americans, the 30-06 is probably I think it's still the most used hunting round, like currently. Overall time, I think the 30-30 is. But
that's arguable.
Yeah, but basically, it's a very, very common hunting round, and so and a very, very common hunting rifle. In terms of what an assault rifle is, in my opinion, it is too difficult to determine what an assault rifle is, because we just look at guns and say this one is being used in evil ways and therefore we want to ban it for everyone, rather than having stricter laws on when people are caught with guns illegally that they're not supposed to have, having stricter fines and, or jail time or things like that for people who are felons who are caught with illegal guns. But I don't know, what is your opinion on this?
So, and to shock everybody, I suppose.
Yeah.
I actually do agree with you on that. That in every time a tragedy happens like this, that's immediately brought up for better gun regulations. I both appreciate and hate that. I appreciate it because it does put a spotlight on guns, and there is things that we need to do as a country to make sure that guns are still reasonably safe and in the hands of people who are safe with them. However, using a tragedy with heightened emotions and instead of being able to think logically and rationally about what actually makes sense is not okay. That's how we get ridiculous things that happen, like calling this an assault rifle, even though I suppose nobody's actually done that, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. um, so it's we need to get past a tragedy but still keep the fact that we need to discuss in a serious, adult, and reasonable, rational way gun regulations.